Hello, my dears. Thank you for coming back to class today. Now, I know that the subject of menopause doesn't exactly fill your heart with joy, but hopefully learning about how you can be in control of it does. This is video number 315. It's part of a unit on cancer in general. And one of the most significant aspects of cancer in general is the emotional toll it takes. I think it would be a huge oversight to address cancer and ignore the emotional reaction it creates. So today we'll discuss the emotional reaction to a diagnosis of cancer. This video is an extra that is not covered in my book, regardless of whether you have the first edition or the second edition. And you know, that's the great thing about these YouTube videos. I can teach you all sorts of things that I can't include elsewhere. So, what happens if you receive a diagnosis of cancer? Well, a lot of things, some of which compound the actual physical aspects of the disease. The entire topic of cancer is shrouded in fear. Even though there are diseases that are much more devastating than cancer, we tend to fear cancer more than just about anything. You've already learned in this education that the three big diseases of estrogen deficiency are the greatest risks for the vast majority of women at the time of postmenopause. Yet, most women still fear cancer more than any of the diseases of estrogen deficiency. This is irrational, but fear has never been consistent with reason. Fear is purely emotional, and fear is the most powerful emotion on earth. Fear paralyzes our brains and impairs our ability to think clearly. So let's walk through the process of what happens if you receive a diagnosis of cancer, realizing that everything occurs on the backdrop of fear. Fear is a filter through which everything else passes. And this filter of fear distorts everything. The word fear, F-E-A-R, has become an acronym for false evidence appearing real. And this is definitely true in the context of cancer. But the cancer itself may not be false, but much of what we perceive about it is. Fear is at the very root of our emotional reaction to cancer. So let's address the emotional reaction to cancer by going through the sequence of events that happen when you discover that you have cancer. The first thing that happens to put you in a situation of dealing with cancer is a definitive diagnosis of cancer. Now, this may be something that happens gradually with symptoms to give you a hint beforehand, or it can be a sudden, unexpected diagnosis that comes out of the blue with nothing to make you suspect a cancer diagnosis. Either way, the minute your doctor utters the word cancer, it's like someone hit the mute button. Quite literally, you do not hear a thing your doctor says after he or she utters the word cancer. You see their mouth moving, and you know their words are important, but you can't hear a thing. It's as if the word cancer consumes you so fully that you are unable to devote a single molecule in your body to anything other than digesting the word cancer. Your imagination takes over, and whatever you associate with the word cancer becomes your reality. F-E-A-R, fear, false evidence appearing real. Your mind runs away with you. For most people, the first thought is that cancer means death. And the thought of death causes more fear. So in just the first few seconds of learning that you have cancer, fear is by far the strongest emotion. You know, decades ago, there was a stigma associated with cancer. It wasn't common enough to be familiar to people, and it wasn't treatable enough for it to be something most people survived. So it carried a stigma of certain death. And because certain death makes everyone uncomfortable. It created distancing behavior between people. At a time when a cancer patient needed support, he or she received isolation. This started changing when movies like Love Story appeared. That's me playing the theme from Love Story on the piano. I just thought it would be fun to include it. But over time, as cancer has become more commonplace and there is more awareness about its nature, the stigma has loosened. Now, instead of cancer being an unfamiliar, scary, rare condition, it's one that's familiar to everyone. In fact, nowadays everybody knows someone who has had cancer. So while historically, someone with a cancer diagnosis might keep it a secret as long as possible, that is not the way people react today. In fact, it's just the opposite. Now, if you receive a cancer diagnosis, you are likely to tell your friends and family right away. So the second emotion that you have after leaving your doctor's office is that you need to share your bad news with your good friends. It's due to the emotion of feeling all alone. Now, we all expect our loving friends and family to be caring, gentle, and helpful and supportive. And while that's what most of them intend to do, it does not feel that way to you. We live in a time when people share so much information and so many of their own medical experiences that nearly everyone you know knows someone else who has had cancer. And when you tell people you have cancer, instead of giving you love and support, they tell you horror stories. I say horror stories because that's what they feel like to you. They don't think of them as horror stories, but that's the effect they have on you emotionally. In other words, they tell you about other people they know who had cancer. Most of the time, the horror stories include some kind of advice like, have this surgery, don't have that surgery, eat this, take that herb, see this doctor, whatever you do, don't treat it like that. They all mean well, but if you ever ask a cancer patient how those comments make them feel, they will tell you that they all make them feel lousy. Ultimately, it makes you wish you had never told anybody about your diagnosis. So if you're diagnosed with cancer, think twice about sharing your diagnosis with anybody. And if you're a family member or a friend of a cancer patient, be supportive and loving while keeping all your stories to yourself. If you are not a medical professional with expertise in cancer, just keep your mouth shut. Sometimes there are great opportunities to just shut up, and this is one of them. I assure you that the person with cancer will be better off without your input. Another unwelcome offering from others is citations of statistics based on their own circle of acquaintances. This is where people tell you how many people they know with your cancer. It is never a good idea to substitute statistics from your circle of acquaintances for genuine statistics. Even though they have no medical training at all and cannot possibly know if your cancer is like someone else's cancer, these people make proclamations about your prognosis or treatment. And sometimes they say things like, everything will be okay. And while that sounds good, it certainly doesn't seem like an accurate statement to you at the time. And it feels like they are dismissing your concerns. The third emotion you feel after receiving a cancer diagnosis is desperation. You are desperate for some information and answers to beat the cancer. Now, in times past, you relied on your doctor to tell you what you needed to know about your cancer. After all, no two cancers are alike. and only your doctor knew the precise nature of your cancer. But that's not how things happen anymore. Nowadays, the first place most people go for information is the internet. And while information is very accessible on the internet, it is not necessarily accurate or pertinent. If you do not have a background in medicine, it is very likely that you will fall prey to advertising when searching for information. I always say there's a very fine line between ed, ed, and ad, ad. Ed is educating. Ad is advertising. But for some odd reason, most people don't recognize the difference these days. When you find a website for a cancer center that is the best in treating your cancer, it's advertising. That cancer center created that website. They are promoting themselves. When you find a miracle product for your cancer, that's advertising. The company that makes the product is promoting it. Do not fall prey to advertising if you have cancer. You can waste valuable time and make many mistakes in your effort to take control of your disease. Instead of turning to the internet, get some different opinions and perspectives on your situation from professionals in the precise field of your cancer. Get a second, third, fourth, fifth opinion. And be sure to confine yourself to the disease care industry. Do not go to a wellness provider for a disease. That's just about the most backward thing you could possibly do. If you have cancer, you are not well. Professionals in the wellness industry know about wellness, not disease. So do not employ your naturopath, chiropractor, dietitian, nutritionist, herbalist, fitness expert, acupuncturist, or hypnotist to cure your cancer. That would be like asking your housekeeper to repair your roof. Housekeepers are experts at maintaining a normal house. They are not qualified to fix broken houses. Put yourself in the care of a professional who has expertise in the precise kind of cancer you have. You can certainly use wellness options alongside what the disease professionals offer. Just don't substitute wellness for disease. And don't stop doing what your disease care specialist recommended because your wellness specialist told you to. The next series of emotions fall into a category called the 5 stages of grieving. These stages of grieving were identified by Elizabeth Kubler-Ross in her 1969 book entitled On Death and Dying. She was a psychiatrist who worked with terminally ill patients, and she identified 5 very specific stages through which people progress anytime they are confronted with a diagnosis that is life-threatening. The first stage of grieving is denial. Denial is when you just cannot believe you have cancer. You think there must be a mistake. You wonder if your test results were mixed up with someone else's. In short, you just can't believe that cancer is your reality. The second stage of grieving is anger. This is when you become frustrated and resentful of the fact that you have cancer. You wonder, why me? You say, I don't deserve this. And you act angrily toward others because you are mad about your own situation. The third stage of grieving is bargaining. This is where you search for negotiation. You swear you'll go to church, change your diet, practice a healthy lifestyle. You behave as if there's hope of not having to deal with the cancer. The fourth stage of grieving is depression. This is when you feel like giving up. You wallow in despair and assume you're going to die. You become sad, isolated, disinterested, and despondent. The fifth stage of grieving is acceptance. This is when you finally deal with your reality. You decide that you will prepare for cancer treatment and cope with the situation. It finally feels somewhat peaceful. Now, most people progress through these 5 stages in this order: denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. However, some people experience a different order. And most people also move through the stages at a predictable pace, but some do not. Some get stuck in one phase or another. And as unproductive as some of these stages may seem, they are all normal parts of dealing with a cancer diagnosis. One of the emotions that is not common after receiving a cancer diagnosis is one of self-blame. There is something about the human psyche that inhibits us from blaming ourselves for our negative situations. Instead, we blame fate, Mother Nature, chance, etc. Most people who are diagnosed with cancer do not focus on all the things they might have done to cause their cancer. The thought of having caused one's own cancer is just too overwhelming. But unfortunately, if we were to focus on our own behaviors, diet, and lifestyle, we would probably find more answers as to why we got cancer in the first place. And we might raise more awareness as to its cause. If we did that, we might convert the fear that governs our emotional response to cancer into FACT, or F-A-C-T. I made that up as an acronym for Factors Actually Contributing Truth. So instead of F-E-A-R, false evidence appearing real, we have FACT, F-A-C-T, factors actually contributing truth. Fact instead of fear. In any case, the emotional aspects of a cancer diagnosis are the worst part of the entire experience for most people. Knowing what to expect and why it happens goes a long way in helping you cope. To summarize, if you receive a cancer diagnosis, you go from the word cancer muting everything, to feeling alone and wanting to tell people, to wishing you'd never told anyone, to desperation for answers, to the 5 stages of grieving, which are denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. And I hope this education on cancer and menopause helps you to avoid ever having to experience any kind of this. Okay, this is where we'll end today. Next week, we'll continue our discussion of cancer in general and talk about the causes of cancer. Please subscribe before leaving class today, and after that, you can find me on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. You can also find me in all my educational resources at menopausetailor.me, and that's where you can schedule a consultation with me and have me all to yourself. Bye!